Of all the conversations I do today, this is the toughest one that I speak on. It's called Your Story, The Wounding Embrace. Chrissy, a young teenage girl, said this to me recently. She said, Brett, this is something, self-injury, that needs to be talked about, needs to be let out, needs to be given a voice, because I, among others, don't feel that we have one. For most of you, self-injury, self-harm is a conversation we don't want to have, but it's a very important one for us today. The Wikipedia defines it as self-harm is deliberate injury to one's own body. This injury might be aimed at relieving otherwise unbearable emotions, sensations of unreality and numbness, or for other reasons. My definition is very simply this. It's hurting yourself in any way, shape, and form with anything you can ever imagine. Now, what a lot of people say to me is, Brett, this isn't a big deal. 3 or 4 years ago, we were 1 in 400 students, 1 in 300 students, even 1 in 200 students. Globe and Mail last January, 1 in 6. And today, we really sit at the statistic of 1 in 5. Now, let me just say this. I do believe that almost all of us self-injure in some way, shape, and form. You know, drinking too much is self-injury, of course, and so is doing drugs. And let me also say, I'm not talking about addiction. I'm talking about people who are getting drunk or getting high to get beyond overwhelming emotions in life. We're not talking about the addiction to drugs and alcohol. Eating too much is self-injury. Eating too little is also self-injury. Anorexia, bulimia, put binge eating in any of those categories. Not exercising is self-injury, and so is exercising too much. The list goes on. Gambling, even promiscuous sex. Erwin McManus from the church called Mosaic in Los Angeles says fake intimacy is better than wide-open loneliness. I know a lot of people, students and adults, who fall into bed with someone thinking they're going to find some great closeness or compassion, and you find nothing but pain, guilt, and more sorrow. Working too hard is self-injury, and so is smoking, depending on why we're doing it. You know, all the ways I just talked about are the actions of self-injury in its most general form. What they really are, though, they're the wounding embrace, the hug that hurts you. You know, very quickly, if we're going to look at how we begin hope and healing, there's only 2 types of people listening. A, those of you who self-injure. You know, if it's you who self-injure, realize there's nothing that I can say, your parents can say, your youth pastor or pastor can say to make you stop. You have to want to stop. Before you graduate, before whatever happens, it has to be you who says, I want to stop. Well, where do we come in, though, as friends and as family and as loved ones? It says in the book Bodily Harm that there is nobody on earth who can or will save you from yourself. You're going to have to do it for yourself, but not by yourself. You know, if we're looking at the place to begin with hope and healing, think of it this way. All the actions are the actions of self-injury. That comes from your feelings of abandonment, hopelessness, helplessness, and the list goes on. But those things come from something deeper. We begin as friends or family or as individuals who self-injure by dealing with our histories and stories. That could be anything from abuse, neglect, divorce, or you name it. We begin by dealing with that with sitting down with a counselor. A counselor, by definition, is someone who gives you advice. Your churches, your pastors, you name it, there are lots of places you can find the counselors in the region you live in Canada today. You know, then after we've begun dealing with those root issues, we deal with our feelings. When you have a bad day, many of us know we can exercise, we can read a book, we can watch a movie. Then and only after dealing with the root issues do we deal with our feelings. The first steps start very simply with you saying either I need to get help or finding the ways that we can help the people around us. I have a website called yourstory.info. It's an entire site built around what we just say are people's stories. We have over 60 stories of people who've struggled with self-injury, but to be posted, you got to go one step farther and say this. Here's where I began my road to healing. And my website again is brettullman.com.